From the studios of Warrantech North, Jeffco Public Schools presents Building Bright Futures, a Jeffco podcast with Superintendent Dan McMinimee.
Hello, this is Dan McMinimee in the spacious studios at Warrantech North with the afternoon engineer, Arvada West student Hollis Pearman. Welcome to our podcast series, Building Bright Futures, and thank you for joining us today for our session around From Farm to Film, the Freddie Steinmark story. I have two very special guests with me today from Wheat Ridge High School, Principal Griff Wirth and Athletic Director DeSimone. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Today we are here to talk about a very special series of events honoring the memory of Freddie Steinmark, a Colorado schoolboy legend. Griff, can you tell us a bit about Freddie and what he means to Wheat Ridge High School?
Yeah, so Freddie, when he was a student at Wheat Ridge High School, he was one of those all-American kids. He's actually probably the kind of guy that we would allow our daughters to date. Quality young man, great character. Freddie was a young man who was also a great athlete. 4.0 student, three-sport athlete, excelling in all of that, excelling in the classroom, excelling on the field, on the court, and on the baseball field. So as he went through his time at Wheat Ridge High School, I think that he was one of the admired athletes, student athletes that we would see at any school. His story's a long story, and let me go into that a little bit. His real goal in life, I think, was to become a professional football player, and he wanted to play at a Division I college. But he was a little guy, about 160 pounds, and no one really would take a shot on him. And finally, right at the 11th hour, Darrell Royal down at Texas said, "I'll go ahead and give you a scholarship." Freddie's goal then was to start every game he could, every game that he played as a Texas Longhorn. And he did that for 2 years. And in his second year, as his team was making a run at the national title, he became the inspiration behind one of the best defenses the country had. On Thanksgiving Day that year, they won the national title by beating Arkansas in what was called the Game of the Century. The week after that, Freddie was diagnosed with bone cancer, and he had his leg amputated at the hip. At that point in time, when you lost a limb, you were in the hospital for months. Freddie was not the kind of guy to back down from a battle, and he was not going to let a little surgery keep him out of the game and off the field. 3 weeks later, when they were playing Notre Dame for the national title, or in their bowl game that year, the Cotton Bowl, Freddie, on crutches, went down and spent the game on the sidelines with his teammates, and once again was that inspiration for victory. The story continues beyond that, because that was courageous, beyond what most of us could do. Afterwards, Freddie ended up impacting our country in a bigger way, and he made a tour and was a inspirational speaker around our country around cancer and cancer research, and ended up spending 4 days at the White House, which is kind of an unprecedented length of stay at the White House, with President Nixon, and encouraged him, was really the inspiration behind him signing the American Cancer Act, which was the first time funding at a national level really was directed toward cancer research. Congress got behind that, and instead of, we were in the midst of a chaotic time in our country's history where it was all kinds of different fractions of people, and a very unpopular war in many segments, and Freddie brought people together and actually started the war and the campaign to research and fund the research for cancer. So that's really the story of Freddie Steinmark.
So Griff, thank you for sharing that inspirational piece. I think that's something that, we don't get an opportunity to talk a lot about with our students. And, being a former high school principal, I know it's important to talk about the great things that have happened in your halls before and why kids should aspire and be able to excel at your school. And that's been one of the things I've been really impressed about Wheat Ridge High School is the long tradition and history of not only great athletics, but great students and great people. And Nick, I know last year when I first started here, one of the events I got to participate in, you brought in some speakers for all of the fall athletes. I think you called it a leadership symposium. And, I was really impressed with that. And from the standpoint of being a former athletic director and a former principal, I know it's important to make those connections. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about current student athletes connecting them to the rich traditions of the high school. Why is that important?
Well, I think Red Coat said it best, who was Freddie's coach. And he said this after they had won that state championship against Lakewood, who was, the power at the time. And he told our athletes, it is not your job to extend this tradition, it's your job to uphold the tradition. And I think we have been talking in that light with our athletes, ever since I got there 17 years ago. It's we're not doing something new. There is a way of doing things the right way. And, the commitment to teamwork and the commitment to character and trying to do the right things, which, in this generation of kids, there's a lot more chances not to do the right things. And so every chance that we get to kind of let them anchor in on something and let them know, those two have passed through these halls and those two have found a way to do this, you can do it. And you rely on each other for that strength. And so through the leadership symposiums and with, I have a great set of coaches who believe in that same message. I always have. The loyalty there to each other and the school is huge, and the community is huge. And so in some ways it's easier maybe for our athletes to do that. I remember when we played Valor in the state championship soccer game, and we were at Dick's Sporting Goods, and I was standing alongside Valor's athletic director, and we had all of our crowd behind us, and they were going crazy, and they were new and kind of didn't know how to act about that, I guess. And he said, how do you do this? And I go, it's not something you can buy. You have tradition, you uphold it, you honor it because of those who did it before you. So, we work hard on that with our kids, and having the example of Freddie, his pictures in our halls, his Steinmark Awards in our halls, and we've had 5 winners of the Steinmark Award. It's an interesting story about the Steinmark Award. The Denver Post kind of wanted to coin that award, and they wanted it to be just a football award. And old man Freddie's dad, said, no, I'm not going to let you name it the Steinmark Award, because Freddie was not just a football player. He was a great person, he was a great athlete, he was a great student. He was a great teammate. And so now, you're not going to be able to do that. Well, that's when Scott Stalker in the Sidelines newspaper at the time came up with what is currently the Steinmark Award, and that's to the best male and female student athlete, throw in citizenship and commitment type of person. And so there's been 87 winners, about 45 years worth. And Dave Logan was the first one to win that award. And the first 2 years were just boys, and old man Fred came in and said, no, we got to do this for girls too. And so, we know that we hold ownership in all that, and we don't let our kids forget it. And so that's what we push.
That's excellent. And that's what I really believe in too. Athletics is so much bigger than just performing on the field. It's a way of students comporting themselves in your student body. It's wanting to be a great student, wanting to be a great teammate. Those are all things that kids learn through athletics. That's why they're so important. More with Griff and Nick after the break.
You're good. You can do it. We're almost there.
It's a bright, sunny morning here at All-Star Park at Kelly McGregor Field in Lakewood.
Keep going, Roman!
The cheers are for competitors at Jeffco's first ever cross-country meet day, sponsored by Jeffco Adapted Athletics.
These kids are so incredibly special and have so much talent.
Shelley Darfler is a challenge teacher at Columbine High.
It just makes my heart burst. I'm just proud of them for coming out here and participating, whether they ran or walked. They're out here, and we are a team.
All right, we're going to start again.
Ready? Marks? Set.
Go! Go, 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 go! Go, guys!
I want people to know about the differently abled is that they're human beings, just like everybody else.
Watch the full story now on JPS-TV, Jeffco's official YouTube channel, a place where you can discover your district.
Jefferson Public Schools, building bright futures.
So I have a question here, or a thought. Tell us about the film My All-American, Griff. The screenwriter is the same talent who brought us Rudy and the Hoosiers, correct? Were you involved in any way with that, or any discussions about that?
You know, they approached us for very few things. They wanted to know a little bit about the school, about the mascots, some of the physical plant, but they really, for the movie, you know what, I think they were relying on a book that had been written. And then they also, I think, had some advisors that they were former teammates of Freddie's, or maybe touch base with Sammy Steinmark. And so there was some involvement in other ways. But really, My All-American, from what I understand, yeah, a quality cast and director, pretty true to life story, you know, not Hollywoodized as much as many films. In fact, the director in an interview said, you know, it's really hard. You want to find about a protagonist, you want to find their weaknesses, and you want to find out what makes them real and makes them human. And this is a guy who it was really hard to find fault with. This was a guy who did the right thing, and he did things the right way. And in all facets of his life, he did that. So it was really hard to find something about Freddie to humanize him. But so I think it should be a pretty true-to-life movie, and we're excited for it to come out. We really were not too involved with them in any of the other pieces of it.
We've been probably more involved with the book that was written also.
Faith, Family, and Football.
Faith, Family, and Football by Bauer Hughes. And Bauer was a teammate and a friend of Freddie's since they were 8 years old. Mm-hmm. And that book just recently came out right around the beginning of September. And Bauer has been around with us now since this past summer, because he's also doing a documentary on it, and that's when we met him. And he's alumni, and he loves the school and loves what we are talking about. And so I know in the book, as opposed to the movie, there's a lot more detail to understanding how Freddie became how he was, what his family was like, what it was like growing up in North Denver, and you know, it just spreads. It's a lot more frosting on the cake than a movie is able to do.
Yeah, the book is very personalized and very family oriented, and it talks a lot about Big Fred growing up in the bottoms in Denver, and the struggles that the family had to become a family and to hang in there in a tough economic time. And it really does go back to how Freddie became the man he was and developed the character that he had, which was a depth of character that most of us never get in life, and he had it at 20 years old.
And things weren't easy for him growing up, just like they aren't easy for our kids growing up now. But, you know, that perseverance and wanting to be held of I guess probably the one thing that sticks out in my mind so much about Freddie was that he would fall asleep at night after practice with his Russian book on his chest. Mm-hmm. But Freddie, when he went to the University of Texas, decided he was going to major in engineering because math was his hardest subject. So, I mean, it's that kind of thing, you know, there isn't anything that's going to keep me down.
Yeah, the book has just some wonderful anecdotes about the family and the kids at the time, and Wheat Ridge as a city back in the 60s.
Well, thank you both for joining me today. I really appreciate the leadership that you exhibit. I know our district is a great district because of you both and the things that you do as students at Wheat Ridge High School. Big shoes to fill, and we really appreciate the work that you do. Thank you for joining us today for our Bright Futures podcast. This is Dan McMinimee signing off from Warren Tech North.
You've been listening to Building Bright Futures, a Jeffco podcast with Superintendent Dan McMinimee. This is a production of Jeffco Public Schools.